You're listening to episode 82, Taraneh's Story, a son with cleft palate. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy you're here today. I am so honored to introduce you to Taraneh today. She and I were able to connect over social media. She's a part of an organization called Piper and Enza. And like a lot of the moms that we interview and the parents that we interview here on this podcast, we know that when you are faced with your child having a medical challenge or a medical challenge for yourself, that it really kind of instills this passion in you to pay it forward. And, sometimes that comes right at the beginning of a diagnosis, and sometimes it comes years later. But I think that is why parents deserve to have all of the information, all of the stories, and all of the experiences to help guide them through what they're going through and support them. So that's a big part of what Taraneh is doing in this episode and through Piper and Enza. I kind of have an anxious mind this morning. So I'm sitting here in my closet and just really thinking about the impact that these stories have. And as someone who deals with anxiety, I've talked about it before on social media that I'm on Zoloft, which is so helpful. And I finally found a therapist that I like. Something about listening to these podcast episodes just makes me feel grounded. It brings a perspective. At times it's hard to listen to, and at times I feel very seen and very heard, and I feel empathy for others, and it's just a really grounding experience. And in Taraneh's story, her son was born with cleft palate, and it's interesting. We'll talk about how, the one thing she wanted to get right was this breastfeeding journey because she had done it before and it was challenging and she was just so ready to have that. And of course, cleft palate makes that very challenging. So it's morning time and I am just ready to share this story with you. And I'm about to take my Magic Mind, which is a productivity drink that I'll talk more about in a little bit, but it just really helps me focus and get the tasks done that I need to do. So I can't wait to share a little bit more with you. So let's introduce you to Taraneh. Why don't you just start off talking a bit, introduce yourself, tell us about yourself and your family and where you guys come from.
So my name is Taraneh. I am a longtime nonprofit communications professional and writer, and I live in the Bay Area, California, with my husband and 2 young kids. We've been here together for about 13 years. My husband and I actually met online and ended up moving to the Bay Area together, me for grad school and him for a job 13 years ago. And we ended up making it our home. So bought a little house and live in a community that we love and are really excited to be raising our little ones here. And my son Rasta is 3 years old and my daughter Isla is 7 years old.
Okay, I love both of those names. They're so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So you and I were able to connect because you're a part of an amazing kind of startup organization that really empowers kids and families and health experiences called Piper and Enza. And I think what drew me to want to hear more about your story was just your ability to communicate. And I'm guessing that comes from kind of your background and your profession. But I was wondering if you would share the story of your son and how you were kind of thrust into this whole hospital medical world with your child.
Sure. Yeah. So my first pregnancy was pretty unremarkable and scary by virtue of just being the first. But when my daughter was born, she was what I would like to call aggressively healthy. she just was just a little tank from the beginning, and knock on wood, she still is. And so when my second pregnancy came around, I felt really sick throughout most of the pregnancy. And I don't have a scientific background, but I just didn't feel right. But by all accounts and all the tests and all the genetic testing, the pregnancy was normal and healthy. There were no indications that anything was wrong. And I knew that having a second kid would be tough just because parenthood is hard and
right.
Having to juggle a toddler and a newborn would be hard. So I knew it would be hard, and I was expecting that, but I thought I would have two healthy kids. And the one thing which I was really confident about was breastfeeding. That was the one thing that I kicked butt at the first time around after some hard work and getting adjusted. We went for 2 years. And when my second son was born, after I think a really empowering birth experience, the first thing I did was, okay, let's latch. Let's get this little guy to latch. And he couldn't latch at all. He couldn't latch. And I was just caught up in the overwhelm and happiness that my son was here. And I was super excited that I didn't think much of it. I just thought, oh, he's tired and let's get him examined. And maybe when things are quieter, I can get him to latch. And so the midwife took him to examine him. And the first thing she said was, oh, this is odd. He has a little ridge in his mouth. And that kind of raised an alarm, but I don't think she was supposed to give me a diagnosis. And we had just spent the last 17 hours together, so I felt very connected with her. And so, again, I still, all indications were that things were normal. Mm-hmm. And then we got moved from the labor and delivery room to sort of our room that we would be in, our recovery room. And a pediatrician came in and sort of calmly examined him. And I think that sort of they already knew what the potential diagnosis was, but it had to be confirmed. And so she let us know that she would have to take him to the NICU and said, don't be alarmed, but he's a little bit hypoxic. He's a little short on oxygen. He's definitely got a cleft palate. And what I also think that he has is Pierre Robin Sequence. So Pierre Robin Sequence it's like a series of conditions that cleft palate it's characterized by a few different things. Cleft palate is one of them. And then the other signs of it are a small lower jaw and a tongue that's placed back much further than it should be. And so that combination of things can make it hard to breathe, hard to feed, can also make it a lot more likely that the child can choke. And there is a huge range in severity of this. And what my son Rasta had presented was pretty mild. So that was a lot of information all at once. And before I even had a chance to process it, he was gone, and my husband and I were just staring at each other like, wait, what just happened?
As a child life specialist who has worked with hundreds of children and families over the past decade, I know that no two children are the same. That means I need access to tools that can easily adapt to whatever situation I'm in. SmileMakers has thousands of unique items that help me navigate every scenario. Whether I'm looking for stickers and prizes for goodie bags for my patients or even my own kids, or I'm in child life specialist mode, working clinically to help a child cope with a medical procedure. I'm happy to support SmileMakers because they are a company who prioritizes the mental and emotional well-being of children by offering smiles on every page. Head to smilemakers.com when you're looking for a tool, toy, or prize to help a child smile. Use code ONCALL20 for 20% off your order of smile-making stickers, toys, patient supplies, and more. So were you at a birthing center when this happened, or were you in a hospital with a midwife?
I was in a hospital with a midwife, and actually it was a Kaiser hospital, Kaiser, Northern California. And actually I delivered at a different hospital than I had with my daughter because the one near me, which I live in Oakland, is a teaching hospital, and that's great and everything. But the one about 15 miles away had a well-established midwifery center.
Got it.
In the hospital. So I was really excited to be able to deliver there for my second time. So it was a full hospital and, with a NICU department and everything.
Gosh, it's like those first few moments, it's just a whirlwind in general. And then you top on like somebody saying something to you.
Right.
And so in a different language is probably what it feels like. What?
Right. Because when I had heard the term cleft palate before, I think a lot of people, when they hear cleft palate, they think cleft lip, actually. And even now, when a lot of people look at him and I said, yeah, he was born with a cleft palate, they look at his face and they say, oh, I can't see a scar at all. I said, well, cleft palate is actually internal. Then the cleft lip sometimes presents with a cleft palate. But in our case, he didn't have a cleft lip, but he had a significant cleft palate. Yeah. So I really didn't even know what it was.
Right. Take us from there. You obviously had to recover. How fast were you able to get to the NICU, or did you send your husband first? What happened?
So that night, I was really in shock. And so the first person who went to be with him, an hour or so later when they had him all settled, was my husband. They brought me, and this is, as soon as you get a cleft palate diagnosis, they bring you a hospital grade pump so that you can try and get the colostrum out and get it to the baby. And so I just kind of went into this mode of get him the nutrients. And also I didn't know what he would look like. I didn't know what he would be connected to and what, if I could process it. I needed to get a preview through my husband of like, go let me know what it's like. I need you to prep me.
Yes.
So I started trying to pump, and my husband went in to check on him. And then, a couple of hours later, like maybe at 3 a.m. or something like that, I went in, but not before I pumped some colostrum, and they put it in these 2 little syringes. And I accidentally knocked one over and started crying really loudly.
Oh.
And like 3 nurses ran in and immediately I guess this is something that probably happens to them at least like once or twice a day, because they saw that I had spilled my milk and was crying. So it was a really just...
Oh, that is so heartbreaking.
A hot mess express for sure. And my whole family was waiting to hear, like they were waiting to get the text messages of an update, and I couldn't bring myself to get in touch with them. My family's really tight knit, and until the next day, because I literally just was in shock.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, talk to us from what happened after that. How were they able to feed him, and how did you do with having to change your outlook from having this kind of great breastfeeding experience to then feeding in a different way?
When I did go visit him in the NICU, and then I remember it was just like 2 hallways down, from the very beginning, the doctors and the nurses, they told me, once they got him in the NICU and they gave him some help with oxygen and all of that, they realized that it was relatively a mild to moderate case and that his prognosis was good. And so that took away some of the more irrational fear. And one of the main reasons, in addition to just making sure that he was all okay and they were covering all their bases, one of the reasons they kept us in the hospital so long, and that they keep cleft palate families in the hospital for so long, is that their feeding is different. They drink out of a different kind of bottle that has like a special vent in it. You have to boost the milk with extra calories from literally day one, because feeding is an issue and getting calories into their belly is an issue from the beginning. So while a week in the NICU feels like a lot, it was a very educational experience for us. And a lot of it was early OT. We had a lot of specialists coming in, showing us the angle at which to feed him, teaching us about like how we can boost up an ounce from 21 calories to 24 calories and then 27 calories if he would need it, and the best way to get that thicker milk into his belly and all of that stuff. And so there was a lot of education happening in that week. But also, I think at the beginning, even the first couple of months, I was still determined to make breastfeeding work, like direct breastfeeding. And so I was still holding out a lot of hope that once we got home and once we got a little stronger, that maybe I could make it work. Even though, and probably in most cases with cleft palate, the baby is never able to latch, but in a very small percentage, they are. So yeah, it was a whirlwind for sure. But also, like, I'll never forget how magical the NICU nurses are, and what an amazing place the NICU is. Just how strong and special you have to be to work there and work with these families. And again, being there gave me a lot of perspective, because there were a lot of babies in there that were a lot sicker than my baby. There were just so many emotions that when I think back on it, it was a very significant experience, and it was hard, but it definitely set us up for what was to come when we left the hospital.
Yeah. So take us from there. What happened when you left?
So we left the hospital, and actually the hospital right near me, less than 10 minutes away, has a national cleft palate clinic, which is so cool.
That's amazing.
Just like the way that it all went down, people come from all over to go to this clinic, which actually follows the child every year of their whole life until they're 18, and like documents their progress and gave us access to additional resources that we may not have had otherwise, like speech therapy as it relates to craniofacial issues like plastics, orthodontics, all sorts of things. And so that was incredible. We came home with a heart monitor and pulse oximeter, hospital grade, that he had to wear for the first few months because his oxygen situation could change at any moment. We had to sleep him on his stomach. They tell you never to sleep a newborn on your stomach. But if you have a baby with cleft and Pierre Robin, they actually have to sleep on their stomach for safety. And then as an additional layer of safety, they have to wear this oxygen and heart monitor for the first few months. The first few months were really, really hard. Getting any milk in him was so hard. Pumping enough milk was really hard. And I was trying to find a formula that would work. And he got really bad reflux, which is very common with babies in his condition. So it would just be painful for him to eat. And from the beginning, they told us, in order to have surgery, he has to be 20 pounds. In order to have surgery, he has to reach 20 pounds, and he can't have surgery till he reaches 20 pounds. But you want to have surgery before, 16 months or so, just because it's the best time in a baby's growth and development to do that surgery.
It seems so hard. You're told to get as many calories in your baby as possible, but it's almost impossible to feed them, and you're not sleeping and so then it's hard to produce milk, and it's like the perfect storm of this challenge.
Perfect storm. It was a perfect storm. And he was not getting enough calories because he couldn't take them in. So he would just sleep. And the doctors would say, no, you can't never wake a sleeping baby. But in this case, you have to wake up the sleeping baby every 90 minutes and get it around the clock and get as many calories into them as possible. And I think I still have the notebooks, but for 14 months, we wrote down every milliliter that he drank.
Wow.
And for the first couple of months, we had a home health nurse coming in a couple of times a week to check on him, to weigh him, to work with us. It was pretty intense. It was cool, but it was pretty intense, and it was a lot of pressure. And it was probably, he didn't really start hitting his stride with weight gain until 6 or 7 months. The first 3 or 4 in terms of feeding were just a struggle.
I can imagine there's like this whole, like, how do you even process what's happening, right? Like, what? We have a home health nurse coming?
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't feeding supposed to be instinctive? Like, all of these things that just kind of you're prepared for are just kind of thrown out the window.
And so different from my first experience, honestly. So different. And with my first child, when she was 10 weeks old, I decided to quit my full-time job and go to part-time work. But with my son, I was really determined to go back to my job, even with everything that was going on. And I went back to work with a lot of support from my mom, my mother-in-law, my husband. We found a trusted person to help us part-time take care of him. But he still had a lot of doctor's appointments, and there were different things cropping up We were still trying to figure out if his condition was isolated, because sometimes it presents with other syndromes like hearing loss, vision issues, heart issues, things like that. So he had a lot of doctor's appointments. We didn't have a lot of answers at that point. And so I returned to work, and 7 weeks later, I was dismissed because it was just traumatic for me, because I was really trying to make it all work, and my workplace really just couldn't support or accommodate it. And so just a lot of stuff happening. But at that point, I think I was just so focused on getting him to a point of being healthy and thriving that everything else was kind of like collateral damage, you know?
Right, right. So was he able to, I guess you said he started to kind of make his weight and really gain at 6 or 7 months. And then what happened after that? Were you guys able to do the surgery?
Yeah. So he was born, he was like 7 pounds, 2 ounces normal weight. And then at one point, you know, around 2 or 3 months, he completely fell off the chart. And then he started climbing his way up. And then when he hit 5 months, we started him on solids. And the thing with cleft palate babies is food comes out of their nose because they don't have a roof of their mouth. And so, you know, in a way it's kind of comical and sweet and cute. And in a way it's just like, you just don't know how much food or milk is getting into their stomach. You have really no idea, you know?
Yeah.
Outside of just like weighing them every 5 minutes. And so the way that our focus shifted as we were getting closer to the surgery, which was in June 2019, so about 2 years ago now, was continuing to build on his weight to make those 20 pounds, but also avoiding him getting sick, because when kids get sick, they lose a little weight. And also if they get sick and they have any respiratory issues that are lingering, then they can't do the surgery either. So then that became the new thing to freak out about was don't get sick.
Sure.
And so every time he got a cold, we had a nanny share with our next door neighbors who are like our best friends. Every time he got sick, we were all freaking out, both families, you know, keeping the bigger kids away, keeping the babies separate.
I was about to say, yeah, especially when you have older siblings who just have every single thing that you can imagine, you know, every kind of sickness, and they bring it home with them.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. And you know, you want big sister and next door neighbor to be able to hug and kiss the babies. And then all of a sudden, like, don't touch them and go wash your hands and don't kiss them and all of that stuff.
Oh, if only you had known there were a pandemic coming.
Seriously. I think about, as parents, I think we all think about the types of things that were okay 2 years ago to do with a newborn baby or an infant, or the things that we may be allowed. At least
right.
Speaking for myself, you know,
same.
And compared to now, the baby's born during the pandemic. And if any of us had babies born or nieces and nephews born, we didn't really like holding your nephew or your niece becomes an issue. But so yeah, we did have a few colds and things that were really stressful. And on the day of the surgery or the day before the surgery, he weighed in at something like 19.2 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
And he was a little bit sick, and I thought, are they going to do it? But by all accounts, he was doing so well that they decided to move forward with the surgery. And they did. They did move forward with the surgery. And it wasn't a totally straightforward surgery. They had, you know, he's little, and they had a hard time. The one thing that I was really scared about was anesthesia, because like general anesthesia for somebody that's so small, that's why they want to get them up to 20 pounds, is so that part of it is a little bit more straightforward. But a few things went wrong, I guess, if you want to say wrong. The first being they had a hard time getting the breathing tube in. And then they had to stop the surgery because they found they had to suction out snot that was deep in there. And then the third and most scary thing was that they couldn't get the anesthesia at the right level. They were trying to keep it light, on the light side, just to be conservative. And he woke up, I guess, 3 times during surgery, or, stirred and thrashed around and stuff. And so he's a little fighter. So the surgery that was supposed to be like 3 hours went 4 hours. And by the last 45 minutes, I was just pacing a hole in the carpet outside because I thought it's supposed to be done. What's wrong? Was there a complication? Is he okay? I was trying to get information.
So a little bit earlier in the podcast at the beginning, I told you about this productivity drink that I've been trying called Magic Mind. If you've been a part of this community for a while, you know that I heavily rely on caffeine to function. I'm at the hospital. I'm working on Child Life on Call. I'm a mom of 2 young kids. I'm a wife. Just like all of you guys, I wear many, many hats. And the reason I got really interested in Magic Mind is because the creator, James Bashara, was diagnosed with a heart condition. And his doctor made him give up a lot of the daily caffeine intake. So he worked with a team of doctors and food scientists to develop Magic Mind. And it has benefits that do more than just actually keep you awake. It includes ingredients to help you stress less and think more clearly and stay on task. And I'm all about that. If I can have a supplement to my caffeine that makes me get things done in a more efficient way, that is what I'm after. So I'm glad I get to share with you guys 20% off if you go to their website, magicmind.co/childlifeoncall. You enter code childlifeoncall20 and you get 20% off your order. It's a small drink that takes about 2 seconds. It's pretty delicious. It's kind of got that healthy taste to it that you just feel like good stuff's going in your body. So Child Life on Call for 20% off. That's magicmind.co/childlifeoncall for 20% off your order. How do you wish it would have gone down in the waiting room? Are you somebody who would I want our updates, or text me anytime something big happens, or you guys just get back to me at the end? What would work best for you?
I think more updates would have been helpful. I wasn't really given that choice. They said that they would update me as soon as they could, which I think that if I would have been able to have an update right at the mark of when it was supposed to be finished or halfway through, I think I would have done better with more frequent updates. Again, I wasn't given that choice. And at the least, I think if they could have come out when it was supposed to be over and said, everything's fine, it's just taking a little extra time, that would have been really helpful to me. I had, my mom, my husband, and 2 of my best friends with me, and one of them kept braiding my hair over and over in different styles to get me to stay put. She did the Anna and the Elsa, and the other friend, who's actually a doctor, brought a dozen donuts. So I don't even know. And I ate a whole bunch of them.
Oh, that's a good friends right there.
Really good friends. But I was a wreck. I mean, the month leading up to it, the week leading up to it, I was a wreck. And my husband, being however freaked out he was on the outside, he presented a very calm exterior, and I really appreciate him for that, and also my mom, because I can imagine that everything that I was exhibiting on the outside with the anxiety and all of that, they were feeling to some degree on the inside, but being steady for me was just amazing. And when the surgery was over and they called me in, he still doesn't really like doing things the way he's supposed to now at 3.5 almost. But again, they bring the parent in as the baby, the anesthesia, I'm not going to say the word correctly, is wearing off. But he woke up again before they were able to bring me in.
Yeah.
And so by the time I came in, the nurse was holding him and handed him to me, and his face was all scratched up because he had woken up a few times during surgery and was thrashing around, and with whatever was on his face or had kind of scratched his face up. So that was hard to see, but that was the beginning of the next chapter for him. And that was I guess I felt like that was the beginning of our life as a family of 4 being able to exist more normally, and without as much fear and uncertainty.
What were some of the surprising or maybe unexpected moments of going through an experience like this with your child?
Well, I think really truly understanding how resilient children can be, even when they seem so small and helpless. I think that there were so many moments where I felt like, oh man, what's going to happen with him? Like, what is he going to be okay? And seeing him smile through the pain or the discomfort, or, develop this hilarious little personality, even though he was like falling off the weight chart, but then he was still, 5 months old, cracking us up, already like developing a bond with his sister, just that resilience and that spirit, that children have through the most difficult of experiences never ceases to amaze me. And then by the same virtue, I think our own resilience, my husband and mine, even in moments where it felt so hard, we were just this team that was determined to help this baby thrive. And, whatever hardships and punches we were blown, we would just like process it and absorb it and just keep going. And so both of those things, I think, really, really stood out to me. And looking back at those times, I think like those times were really hard, but we came through it, and look at us now. And again, it continues to give me perspective on our baby. At the end of the day, he went through some hardship, but by all accounts, he was healthy. By all accounts, he, like the doctors would say, like overall, he's a healthy baby. And so it just makes me think of how hard it is for some families and what they go through when presented with more serious diagnoses. And it just gives me, I just have a lot of respect for families who go through any sort of struggles with their children's health at any point.
How is he doing now? How, I guess as far as speech and all of that stuff that may be affected by a cleft palate?
He's doing pretty well by all accounts, by most accounts, I guess. His speech was a little bit delayed, but he's catching up really quickly. So COVID kind of slowed everything down. So all of his therapies and the things that he was getting checked twice a year, vision, hearing, speech, all of the things that we were going to clinics for, it all kind of got put on hold for in-person, intervention for over a year. And so now we're just kind of getting back into it. And one thing that we discovered recently, which won't be confirmed for another year or so, is that the way he talks, the speech therapist is hearing a little bit of air between his mouth and his nose. And she thinks that there might be a small opening that has reopened in his palate, which it is relatively common because as bones grow and as like healing happens and development happens, like the repair may not kind of hold all the way. And if that's the case, if they confirm that that's the case, he may have to go in for a small repair when he is 5 or so. But if they determine that it's so small that it doesn't require surgery, that they might just kind of wait and see. And so his speech is going pretty well. He's in preschool now and he's going through the experience like a normal kid. I think there are certain things that maybe as a parent, because of what he went through his first year and a half, I'm sort of lagging on or not pushing him on like potty training, or, I still lie down with him to go to sleep every night, which it's kind of my decision. Like I still like kind of baby him in ways that I didn't do with my daughter. But by all accounts, he is happy. He is spirited. He is, running amok in our home. He's, torturing his 7-year-old sister. So he's doing great. And I'm so, so thankful for him every day. And also my daughter, who really was the center of my universe for almost 4 years. And as a almost 4-year-old, when her brother was born, really understood how much he needed us and like took a step back. If you can imagine a 3-year-old taking a step back.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. So our home is crazy and it's messy and it's happy and anything you would expect for a house with 2 young kids.
What you're saying kind of about the pushing, not pushing, but, the lackadaisical approach on potty training and these like special moments at bedtime. Jessica Pate, who I had on the podcast, she said it so perfectly. She said, the gift of this medical experience or her experience is a shift in priorities. And so with your first baby who maybe is healthy like you had without any issues, those are the big priorities. But now, right, like you know what you've been through. And so the priority is actually maybe a little bit different than it was the first time. And that's okay. It's just a different experience. And it can be a gift.
It is such a gift. I mean, I think from the outside, maybe some people always like to judge parents, of course,
always.
Right? Right? I think from the outside, I think maybe some friends or peers think like, why is she so easy on this little guy? Like, she needs to get him to go to sleep and she needs to get him to sit on the potty. Those are the two main things I can think of right now. But for me, it's just like I got to parent Isla on instinct. And that was my approach, was just go on instinct. And I didn't get to do that with Rasta in the first year. And now I'm parenting both of them instinctively. And I have the gift of being able to do that with him now. And this is what feels right for this mothering experience, you know?
Oh, and what a more beautiful experience to be able to intrinsically feel something rather than, be told externally how it should be done if it doesn't feel right. I would love your opinion on things you wish you knew in the medical world before you were thrown into it. And I know it's probably a long-winded answer, but if you have just kind of a few key points that you were really surprised by, like, oh, that's how this works. One of them for me is just hearing your story and that your husband wasn't allowed to be with him until he was settled in the NICU. It's like, oh, well, he just came out of your body, so why can't your husband go with him?
I think a lot of times with things like that, they're trying to minimize the shock and pain of like the transitions that some of these things require. I don't know. I think that I personally, this is more of like a positive thing. I personally didn't realize what a magical place the NICU could be, like the compassion that is part of that care. Of course, I've heard it from others who have gone through similar experiences, but really the connections that you form and like really how important that part of the job is for them. I felt like they were holding us up. They were literally, figuratively and emotionally holding us during that time. And I think that also the resources that we had access to for our baby, but also for ourselves in that time, I think would be really beneficial for more families to have, families who have kids with less serious conditions or healthy babies who have families that are just trying to figure it out. And I was really blown away by the resources we had available to us and very grateful for them. In terms of what I could have expected or not expected, I think that it was a little bit naive of me to assume that like I would kick butt with feeding my kid, because even babies who don't have a cleft palate, sometimes a baby just can't nurse, can't breastfeed for different reasons, right? And so I think that if I would have gone into it a little bit less confident about that part and a little bit more ready to feed my baby however they needed to be fed, would have been less devastating for me, that part of it, which oddly was so devastating for me and still is in a way, because I was like, that's the one thing I've got down,
That's kids, right? Like the one thing you're sure of is not actually the way it ends up going. I love that. And I'm always blown away. I agree, like, especially the NICU. And I know all hospitals are filled with these types of people, but I agree, the NICU especially is a really incredible place that when you walk in for the first time, you feel like you're walking into a war zone and there's so many beeps and so many tiny babies. And you're like, where are all the parents? And you're just so confused.
Yeah.
And so then when you pull the curtain and you actually like look at the interactions and you feel the love from providers, it just transforms it from a really scary place, which it can be, but to a really amazing one. So when a parent like you, who's going through so much, trauma in your own right, can see it and feel it, it means that NICU is doing an amazing job.
Yeah. I mean, truly, I remember I was so just dazed I wasn't really supposed to be like, I had just given birth. I wasn't really supposed to be like walking a lot, but I like couldn't even feel my own recovery in that moment. And I remember when we were getting ready to be discharged, the one thing I did between my feedings with Rasta, which was like I had to be there every 3 hours or something, I walked to Trader Joe's and I bought 7 thank you cards.
Oh my gosh.
And I wrote a thank you card for each one of our nurses and put it in their little cubby before we left. Because I'm just like, how do I appreciate, I think I got them granola bars. I don't know. How do I appreciate my gratitude for what you've done and been for us in these last 7 or 8 days,
Oh my gosh, like, that makes me want to cry. That's so sweet.
I know.
But it just shows the impact.
100%. 100%. And I think that I didn't, from a specific medical perspective to answer your question, I can't think of anything, but from the perspective of the impact it had on us to have their care and like the weight that it still holds 2 years later, that is something that really stayed with me.
Wow. That's so profound.
They're heroes.
Well, talk to us a little bit about Piper and Enza, and if people want to follow along with you and what Piper and Enza is up to, how can they do that?
So going through this experience, I've been on and off like an aspiring writer for a long time. And going through this experience with Rasta, one way that I sort of processed it was starting to write about it. So I started when Rasta was, I think, 3 or 4 months old. I started a motherhood blog called Mama June Chronicles, where I just wrote about my experiences as a mom, but as a special needs mom, and going through the experience of preparing for surgery with him and all the things, all the milestones. And I've been keeping that up for the last couple of years. And earlier this year, I connected with a woman who read my blog and who had an idea born out of the pandemic, where she was trying to explain what was going on to her kids in a way that they could understand and process and not be afraid of. And she read my blog and we connected, and her idea was Piper and Enza. And it is essentially a company that is working to support kids and families through the inevitable health and wellness experiences that they will face in their lives. So whether that's anything from literally getting a booster shot or a blood draw to having to go to the ER for a broken bone, or having to deal with a hospitalization or a more serious illness. Like I said, in my experience, having a baby with special needs, we had access to the resources, the OT and speech therapist, and then social worker for us. But most families, some with special needs kids and some who just have healthy kids, but still want their kids to be able to have a healthy outlook towards the experiences that they will face, their healthcare experiences. How great would it be to make these resources more available, more commonplace? And this was Rita's idea. So now I joined her to focus on building out the community, resourcing some experts who could dive into some of these topics. And we've been working together for 3 or 4 months. We're just starting out, but our plan is to do this, to build a company that can provide these resources and be a one-stop shop for families who are going through all sorts of things, to be able to have developmentally appropriate tools, resources, toys, children's books that could help them support their kids through these experiences.
And I'm such a fan of your mission and just so excited to see what you guys create. And, as a child life specialist, I've known with my own children that a lot of the skills that we learn to put into practice in the medical setting are totally transferable to real world scenarios. And so I think that you guys are making this accessible is really great. And so I can't wait to see what comes next for Piper and Enza. Is it Piper and Enza on Instagram? Yes.
So piperandenza.com is our website. We have a blog that we're growing out on there. And there's also a shop where we'll be selling. We have 2 books coming out, 2 children's books coming out soon. We're super excited about. And then also on Instagram at Piper and Enza. And one thing is, like, we love you, because child life should be for every child.
I agree.
Every child needs a child life specialist. So that's one area where we're excited to try to share with wider audiences. We're so excited that you're doing it, because ever since I started learning about child life with my own son and just through working with Piper and Enza, literally using that same language with my kids when it comes to anything, like putting Neosporin on, man.
Right.
They process it so much better. And why shouldn't every parent and every kid have access to that, right? And so I'm just so excited to be doing this work, to be meeting people like you, and to see where it takes us.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your family's story. I think there's a lot of other families going through similar experiences that will be able to resonate. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Taraneh's episode. You can follow along with her at Mama June Chronicles on Instagram. I just really appreciate you guys being here. Go to Piper and Enza, follow along with all the great resources that they share, and I will see you again next week.